So when last we left, we had just excavated the house site, and now we are preparing to dig the footers. We did remeasure and resquare the footer outline before we dug, so that we made sure that we had the right measurements. In the back, the footers will be dug to a depth of about 3 feet, and on the high side, which you can't see here yet, as I mentioned in a previous video, we are virtually on bedrock, so the footers will only get dug down a couple of inches, and then the footers will be poured directly to the bedrock, and we'll pin those in with rebar. Um, and there was a slight drop off, which is why we're able to get 2 or 3 feet here on the backside, because the shelf of the bedrock starts to come down pretty quickly around the middle of the side of the house. And so there's kind of a drop from the bedrock into the packed soil. Here you can see we're starting to frame around it. This gets redone a couple of times for reasons that'll become obvious here in a second. But again, the boards on the back are really just right on the bedrock itself. So this is the rainy season part. So we dug the footers in dry weather. We had a couple of scheduling conflicts, and then the rains came. It rained heavily for 4 or 5 days a week for 4 to 6 weeks. It was a really long time before we could get back in here. The hill to the house site is all clay. There's a gravel road, but getting right down to the site close enough to bring in a concrete truck and waiting for things to dry, it took a really long time for us to actually be able to pour the footers. One of the problems we ran into here, of course, is with all of the water coming into the footers, the sidewalls tended to cave. So I came out to the site, which is about 20 minutes away from where we're living, every day or every other day for this entire period to just keep as much water out of here as possible. I ended up actually knocking a channel out of one of the corners of the footers heading downhill. So like as the rains came, it didn't fill all the way up. It only filled up a little bit at the bottom. But you can see that what started as very straight footer lines became kind of shaggy with a little bit of cave in. We did scoop this back out, cleaned it up as we did get into drier weather, added gravel to the bottom, still got rain, so still had to keep pumping water out. But we were able to finally have the concrete trunks come in and pour the footers. Here you can see what we did was we poured the concrete directly in the ditch. So we just filled up the ditch. We did have a couple of boards in that big channel, as you can see, so that we didn't have to fill up the entire ditch, but filled basically this up from the bottom. And we did this in 2 pours. So we did that ditch first and got it to fairly level, and then we came back and reframed in the rest of the footer, and then we were going to do a single pour on the top here and what is ultimately a double pour on the bottom. Here you can see the concrete's dried after several days, and we still have yet to pour the second round. And here the concrete truck's backing into our gravel drive. That gravel stops not too far behind where that concrete truck is now, and so that's where we get the clay coming down. You can see it there, and we just didn't want to gravel all the way down here because that's going to be temporary. And now we start just using my tractor to bucket the concrete throughout the form. And so here what we did was we framed out the rest of the footer on top of the ditch pour that we did earlier. And what this is ultimately going to result in is a 2-foot drop from the top of the footer on the high side that is attached to the bedrock, and on the low side, which was poured directly into the ditch. What that ultimately means is that we ended up with 3 extra courses of cinder block to get level all the way around. So we had 14 rows of cinder block on the high side, on the bedrock side, and 17 rows on the low side, which made it a nice even wall all the way around. You can see we're already staging the sand and concrete for the wall to get built. So the final dimensions of the footer are 2 feet wide in most areas. It did get a little narrower in a couple of areas for reasons that I can get into later. But yeah, 2 feet wide, about 8 inches on the high side that's attached directly to the concrete, and then another, like I said, 3 feet on the far side. So really solid base. We are also putting up 12-inch block wide instead of 8-inch block for additional structural integrity, and we'll show that in an upcoming video. Thanks. Let me know if you have any questions.